It's a wonderful day. Good morning, everybody. Greetings to all of you from India and who are joining from abroad. I welcome you all on behalf of TISEED Indian Fellows Network team, myself, Dr. Swati Chakraborty. I'm very humble and very happy to be part of the KAISEED team. We have our organizer of this particular webinar session, Dr. Professor Baharul Islam from IIM Kashipur, and he will lead the session. We'll be starting formally. Thank you so much, Baharul sir, for your wonderful initiative that you have planned and we actually planned together. Thank you so much, and the session is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, let me thank all of you who have joined the session today. It's a very important session for all of us who are working in interreligious and interfaith dialogue. We are expecting our keynote speaker, His Excellency, the Governor of Kerala, Sri Arif Muhammad Khan, to join very soon. In the meantime, I would like to introduce the platform and the issue before you. This program is a part of a series of programs we do as fellows of KAISEED Dialogue Center in Vienna. KAISEED, the full form is King Abdulaziz International Center for Interreligious and Intercultural Dialogue, which is an initiative of the Holy See, the King of Austria, the Kingdom of Spain, and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. And it was a global alliance partnership to promote interreligious dialogue and prevent hostile conflicts and violent conflicts among various communities across the world. Every year, they select fellows who are from various countries, and they are trained and they are supposed to work for interfaith dialogue in association with KAISEED. And this is one of this program, fellows program, that you are attending today. We welcome Dr. Sumit Narula, who has just joined, Director of Communication Studies at Amity University. And
good morning, sir. Good morning to all.
We are just about to receive Honorable Governor here. Good morning and namaskar, Your Excellency. Welcome to the webinar on sustainable development and interfaith dialogue, organized by KAISEED and Work for Dialogue and PFI Foundation Assam. With your kind permission, may we start, sir?
Please.
Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished participants in this webinar, I have the pleasure to present before you and introduce who does not need any introduction. His Excellency, the Governor of Kerala, Sri Arif Muhammad Khan. Sri Khan was born in Bulandshahr, 1951. He received his graduation degree from Aligarh Muslim University and the law degrees from Lucknow University in Uttar Pradesh. Sri Khan is a student leader. He belongs to the alma mater which I joined, Aligarh University, and he served as a general secretary of our students union in 72-73 and president during 73-74. That introduced him at a very young age. He was elected at the age of 26 to the assembly, the Legislative Assembly of Uttar Pradesh from Siana constituency in Bulandshahr. That started an illustrious career in politics, in intellectual activities and social reform and overall civil society dialogue. Sri Khan's administrative excellence and capabilities are nationally noted, internationally recognized. One of the youngest Union Cabinet Minister, Sri Arif Muhammad Khan, held the portfolios of energy and civil aviation. He was earlier introduced to the Union Cabinet as Deputy Minister for Information and Broadcasting. He holds also the portfolio Minister of State for Agriculture, Energy, Industry, Company Affairs, and also the most important, the Home Affairs portfolio. In the intellectual and academic domain, Shri Arif Muhammad Khan is known for his best-selling, very recognized book, Text and Context, Quran and Contemporary Challenges, which was published by Rupa in 2010, which was one of the top list of the readers for a long time, and it is still recognized as one of the most relevant reference in text and context of Quran and Muslim community across the country. He is a well-known writer, columnist. He has written very widely. And ladies and gentlemen, now Sri Arif Muhammad Khan, who has assumed as 22nd Governor of Kerala on 6 September 2019, has joined us as a keynote speaker of today's webinar. Today's webinar, very briefly, is based on how does peace as a part of sustainable development goal is very necessary across the world. We are discussing interfaith dialogue, interreligious, intercultural dialogue between communities, faith groups, and other cultural communities, so that they can come together, discuss about each other, and promote peaceful coexistence. Your Excellency, we are joined by a number of delegates from India and abroad who are also fellows of CAICID Dialogue Center in Vienna and members of the civil society, academia, and various other individual interests who have registered for this webinar. Now, I would request you more humbly to deliver the keynote address.
I'm very thankful to Professor Baharul Islam, not only for the invitation, but also for the gracious words that he has spoken about me. But then he was in Aligarh, and possibly, and he was there during my time. So I'm very thankful for whatever he has said. And I would like to compliment the Indian Institute of Management Kashipur Web Platform 4 and King Abdullah bin Abdul Aziz International Center for Interreligious Dialogue for coming together to organize this event. And incidentally, today is World Human Rights Day. And every sustainable development, that is, sustainable development is part of the topic which you are going to discuss today. And every sustainable development, in fact, is a goal that seeks to promote human rights. Free interreligious dialogue is also a human right in every society. Therefore, I feel it is very appropriate, and I compliment you for choosing this topic for the webinar. But here, I would like to say that any interreligious dialogue can produce positive results only when we try to understand the genius of each religious tradition, because the genius is not the same. The message is the same. There is no doubt. But the backgrounds are different. The essence is different. The genius is different. When we compare the religious traditions all over the world, then we find that most of the religious predictions in their nature are prescriptive, which means that when you belong to that particular tradition or you become part of that tradition, then certain beliefs are absolutely essential for you. And if you deny, though I'm talking of those essential beliefs which are critical to the practice of that religious tradition. If you do not believe, I mean, here again, religion mostly has become, since long time, marker of the identities. But within the same religious group, the personal faith which people have, individuals have, that is not necessarily the same. But most of the religions, since they are of prescriptive nature, therefore, if you stop to believe even one of them, then the tradition, normal practice which is seen is that the tradition, they have a mechanism where they refuse to recognize such people. In fact, we have recent example, by recent I mean last few decades, where even the parliament of a country has passed a law saying that a particular group of people, they no more belong to this particular, in our neighborhood it has happened, in the case of the Qadiani, where parliament has taken it upon itself. They will decide about the faith of the person. And they declare them as, I won't use the same terminology which they have used, but they have said that they do not belong to this particular religious denomination. And they have also been subjected to violence and all kind of persecution. They were forced to flee the country. Even today, these things are happening. And unfortunately, the history is such that the civilizations were defined either by race or by language, and in the little later period, they were mostly defined by the religious denomination one belonged to. On the other hand, the Indian tradition is highly reflective. It is not prescriptive at all. The Indian tradition, that possibly is the reason why there is so much diversity. Diversity to the extent that persons belonging to the same family, they worship different gods. Two sisters observing fast on 2 different days of the week or the month. They have the concept is not only of the omnipresent and omnipowerful God, but the concept of Kul Devta, the concept of the family deity, the concept of the Gram Devta, all these concepts are there. And it goes to the extent where somebody who is born into the tradition, if he or she denies everything, anything and everything, even then nobody has the authority to expel the man from the fold. I would say Sanatan tradition, but generally people call it Hindu tradition. nobody can say that you have ceased to be a Hindu. Because the man is saying, I do not believe in any God. Man is saying, I do not believe in Rama or Krishna, or I do not believe in going to the temple. Even then, nobody has the authority to throw out the man from the fold of the tradition. Therefore, first thing we have to be very careful is about that, is to understand the genius of each tradition individually. They all should not be clubbed together and they should not be put on the same pedestal. The prescriptive traditions, and then there is reflective. The reflective tradition is to the extent that the Rig Veda declares, Iyam visrishtiriyat abhuv yadiva dadhe yadiva na yo asya adhaksha param. The meaning that who has created this world, this universe, multiverse, the entire, because the concept of multiverse already we find in not one shlok of the Upanishad, in so many shloks we find the concept of multiverse, not just of universe. Isha vasya midam sarvam yat kinjaktiyam jagat. So now the Rig Veda is raising question, who has created this universe? Maybe the one who is sitting up above in the sky, or even that one sitting up above, even that one does not know who has created it and who is regulating it. So now it does not mean that an attempt is being made to deny the supreme truth or the cosmosic reality. Basically, thing is that general people are being asked to reflect about it, to try to find it out. And that is why, since ages past, since remotest times, the thought leaders of India, whom we call rishis, they came to the conclusion that diversity is the law of nature. Everybody cannot perceive, all people cannot be confined to one single interpretation of reality. All people, rather each individual will try to perceive it, and when after perception, if he develops the feelings of devotion, then each one will articulate, will express her or his devotion in a manner which is suited to its genius. I will quote another 2 lines from the Upanishad, which says, Achintay siya prame yasya nirgun siya sharirina upasaka namo siddhiyartham brahmino roop kalpana. That supreme reality is one. Vahid, Tawheed, if I use the Arabic terms. There is no duality about it. Achintay siya prame yasya nirgun siya sharirina. But that supreme reality is beyond comprehension, beyond expression, beyond the reach of our mental limits. Therefore, the devotees have been given the right or permission to imagine of him as they like, and in the form of that imagination, they can give expression to their devotion. There is a Hadith Qudsi in Islamic tradition. Hadith Qudsi is different from ordinary Hadith. Why? Because these Hadith Qudsi, which are few in numbers, very few in numbers, on which there is no difference of opinion among the Islamic scholars. And that hadith says, Ana inda zanne abdi bi. I am as my devotee imagines of me. Then then the devotee, as he imagines of me, he will see me in the same form. Even great Sufi saint Ali Hajweri, who is considered among the top Sufis, he says, Al-Majaz Qantaratul Haqiqat. The image is the bridge to reality. Even a poet who is sometimes enthusiastically is described as a poet of Islam, Allama Iqbal, he says, Kabhi ए हकीकत मुंतजर नजर आ लिबास मजाज में कि हजारों सजदे तड़प रहे हैं मेरी जबीने नियाज में. What does that mean? He wants to see the formless God in some form. He is praying that sometime I want to see in some form, so that all those feelings of devotion which lie buried under me, I can give expression to them. Now, if you say the same thing in prose, in Urdu, I am 100% certain that within no time there will be fatwas against you. So we should not try to put all the traditions on the same pedestal. Indian tradition is very different. Why? All other traditions, how you define them? Either by race or by language or by religious faith. In India, I have already told you, even if you deny everything, every religious belief, nobody has the authority to throw you out. So how Indian civilization has been defined? The problem was that right from the beginning of the civilization, and this we can understand from the oldest book, that is Rig Veda, proclamation was made. The proclamation was Ekam Sad Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. The truth, the supreme reality is one. There is no duality about it. But people who try to know it or who have come to know of it, they describe it variously. Why? You know, sometimes somebody has written this, and I find it very, very apt and very beautiful expression. This is the scripture, the Quran, the Bible. There is no doubt they are books, they are divine books. The source is divine. They have come from the divine. But the mind that understands them is human. Therefore, they try to interpret in a manner which is of their liking. And that is why, possibly that is one of the reasons why Indian tradition has not insisted and has accepted the fact that all people should not be confined to one single interpretation of reality. We commit a blunder, in my opinion, in understanding things when we put all the Hindu, Muslim, Sikh, Isai. Oh, the traditions are different. They have to be understood differently. Unless the Indian tradition, if we will use non-Indian paradigm to understand it, we will reach wrong conclusions. Here in India, the thought leaders, if suppose they had chosen race to define the Indian civilization or Indian beliefs, what would have happened? India right from beginning has attracted people from all races, from all over the world, then what would have happened? People belonging to other races who are part of the Indian society, they would have been excluded. Because race is an exclusive concept. There are so many races in the world. Suppose they had chosen language, even if they had chosen Sanskrit, then all other people who did not know, who did not speak Sanskrit, they all would have been excluded. Likewise, if they had chosen the personal faith, then even the families would have been divided. Because one person goes to the temple of Vishnu, the other person goes to the temple of Shiva. So they would have been excluded. So what ultimately they decided, or what they made because of their tapas, they realized this truth. And they made that truth the basis of the definition. And the basis of the definition, the basis was the ground which was used to define Indian civilization or Indian way of life or Indian religion was Atma. Atma, it is not only that all human beings are included, but Indian thought has seen even plants and animals, has acknowledged that even they have the Atma. Therefore, you can't exclude anybody. If you cannot exclude anybody, then I have seen many a times, I have read it in the books, that Shankaracharya, who hailed from Kerala, he set up 4 mutts in different parts of the country. And he created unity of India. I really feel like laughing at it, because the buildings do not create unity. Howsoever magnificent buildings you make, what created unity was that to these 4 mutts, Shankaracharya given a Mahavakya, and each Mahavakya for each of these mutts came from these 4 Vedas. The significance is 4 mutts, different parts of the country, each one has motto from 4 Vedas. The motto comes from a different Veda, but they all have the same meaning. The meaning is Aham Brahmasmi. In the form of the spirit, in the form of the Atma, it is the divine who dwells in me. Tattvamasi, the same divine dwells in you. I am Atma Brahma. The spirit is Brahma. Prajnanam Brahma. The wisdom, knowledge, Vidya, that is Brahma. This does not allow this. The Indian tradition does not allow anybody to sit in judgment about the personal faith of a person. And once we decide that the faith of my personal faith of my neighbor is none of my business. Even Quran clearly says, Ma khalqukum wala ba'sukum illa ka nafsin wahida. Your creation and your resurrection, when you will be called to account, are nothing but as an individual. Quran again emphasizes, the father shall not come to the rescue of the son, nor son will be able to help the father. The mother cannot help the daughter cannot help. Everything will be decided on the basis of your deed. Karma. Once we agree to this thing, and when my point is not that non-Indian religious traditions I am absolutely convinced that as far as the scriptures are concerned, even the non-Indian traditions, whether it is Islam, it is now the Islam is more or less Indian, but I am only talking about originating. You know, we must remember it, that our Christianity is older than the European Christianity. Our Islam, India is any mosque built outside Mecca and Medina. I am not even saying Arab countries. Mecca and Medina, a mosque built outside, was in India, in Kerala, in Thrissur district. The Jews came to us in the first century, in the century when the Temple of Solomon was destroyed. India has always, not that because as human beings we are better than others. No, the way of life of India, the civilizational values of India, it created an awareness that we should be hospitable to those who are being persecuted in their own land. And that is why, you know, this is very interesting. Swami Vivekananda has mentioned about the Jews, about the Christians, about the Zoroastrians who fled from Iran and found shelter in India. But I had written in one of my articles about 14 years back, which has been published, which was published by, if I remember correctly, by Times of India, that India also became home for the persecuted Sayyids. Sayyids mean the descendants of the family of Holy Prophet. In the Arab world, there are barely 4 or 5 families who claim to be descendants of that family. In India, right from Kerala up to north, in Assam, in Maharashtra, you find localities which are called Sayyadwala or some similar name. Why they are here and why they are not in Arab? Because in the polity, at that time, there was no concept of the state, and the state cannot come into existence without a state exchequer and police force. So admittedly, during the time of Huzur Sallallahu, there was no police force, there was no state exchequer. But some sort of polity, yes, it was. This polity which was founded by the Holy Prophet, those who assumed the reins of control, they did not allow, they always were fearful of the descendants of the Holy Prophet. They looked at them as political threat. Within 48 years in the field of Karbala, they butchered every male member of Prophet's family. And those who were associated with the family, over a period of time, they all fled from there and they took the route via Iran and Central Asia. They came to India. And they settled in India because, you know, although I have already taken enough time, but it will not be out of context if I mention that about the Sindh Muhammad bin Qasim. The general impression is that he came and he conquered Sindh because some women who were Muslim women who were going from Sri Lanka to by ship. The alternative narrative is that Raja Dahir had given asylum to some members of the Prophet of Holy Prophet. And Hajjaj demanded that you return them back. And Dahir said that no, I have given them word of honor. I shall not return them. And he lost his kingdom because of that. So basically my point is that I am convinced there is no dearth of exhortations in the Holy Quran, in the Holy Bible. They do not give us the authority to sit in judgment about the faith of the other persons. Once we accept that I am accountable for my actions, I am not accountable for the faith of the other person. Each one does according to the disposition on which God has created her or him. Once we accept that, then it will definitely lead to establishment of peace in our society, which is so essential to pursue the process of progress and development, what in UN resolution they have described it as sustainable development. Thank you very much. Very kind of you to have invited me. And I'm sorry I have taken more time than I wish to speak. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. We are extremely grateful to you. In fact, you have to rush to another event, but you have given us more time than we expected. Actually, we thought you will give me our. This is our honor, and it was extremely, you can say, thought-provoking. All of us will take something home and in our heart what you have said. And perhaps you have made the foundation of sustainable development and interfaith dialogue to a different pedestal, which we Indian Fellows of CAICIID in Vienna always try to put forward. An Indian civilization, as you said, genesis of all religions are different, but Indian tradition is most inclusive one where every faith is respected. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All the best.